Hello and welcome to another episode of Beast PC. So AMD's RX 5700 series of cards are now AMD's flagships, and they're very popular among PC builders. Going back in the line of AMD flagships to Radeon 7 and the Vega series, we see a small trend, the unique high bandwidth memory. Let's go back one more generation to AMD's proper flagship from 2015, the R9 Fury X. It was the first ever GPU to feature this special HBM. We have one here, naked. Look at the massive die size, surrounded by the 4 little blocks of HBM. This thing was such a beast, AMD shipped it from the factory with a 120mm water cooler. However, this cooler is unfortunately broken. Well then, let's divert our attention to the card right below it, the R9 Fury. This is a Sapphire Nitro triple fan version with the beefy heatsink and huge fans. This might be one of the largest seriously designed GPUs out there. And why is that significant? Well, this thing has a TDP of 275 watts and it can easily saturate it. It's incredibly hot, and so we need a beefy heatsink to tame it. Performance for this card is still excellent even though it's turning 5 years old. Its drivers upon release were a hot mess. However, they seem to be fixed and it runs very stable. Since it's an AMD GPU, they generally age better than their NVIDIA counterparts. Performance now is still very good and more than enough for 1080p gaming. The card enjoys over 500 GB per second of memory bandwidth, which if only it had more VRAM, it would do an extraordinary job in high-resolution, high-textured gaming. The high bandwidth really lives up to its name. This card with more than 500 GB per second has more bandwidth than the newer GDDR6 5700 XT and RTX 2080. Compared to modern cards, it performs about on par with an RX 590, RX 5500 XT, and on the NVIDIA side it's a little bit faster than a GTX 1060 and somewhere around a GTX 1660. The best part is, from May 2020, you can find this card for less than $100 used, making it an excellent value, although it'll need a good power supply. However, its price has gone up very recently in July. To test this card, we're going to use a 5.1 GHz overclocked Core i5 9600K, 16 GB of DDR4 3733 with decent timings, and all games are on SSD storage. So let's get into the benchmarks. To really take advantage of the HBM, we're playing all games here at the highest settings at 1080p, minus some anti-aliasing or motion blur settings here and there. Kicking off with GTA 5 with very high all around, the card was able to push 130 frames, just enough to take advantage of a high refresh rate monitor. GTA 5 is a very well optimized game, but this result is pretty spectacular for such a cheap card. Fortnite at 1080p epic settings still managed 83 FPS average, which is a little lower than I expected, but the epic settings are a little bit over the top. Medium or high would probably be enough to saturate a 144Hz monitor. Due to some issues we had with our FPS capture software, we're reusing the CSGO results from a previous video, but there's still a strong showing for the GPU, giving over 300 FPS average with ease in the benchmark. Now let's move on to some more demanding games. The Witcher 3 at ultra settings ran at 66 FPS average, which is perfect for anybody with a standard 1080p monitor. The game also looks really gorgeous. Far Cry 5 is a similar story, running at 73 FPS at ultra setting in the in-game benchmark. So far, no games have been able to dethrone the card for 1080p 60 FPS gameplay. Well, let's move on to the final, most demanding game. Shadow of the Tomb Raider in DirectX 12 mode at ultra settings is really a PC melter, and here, the R9 Fury put up a good fight, leaving us with 41 FPS average in the in-game benchmark. Still perfectly playable, but not ideal. Only the most demanding games are able to make this card suffer a bit. And power consumption under load? Well, that's a high number as well. Running Furmark gave over 250 watts of average power consumption, so you better have a good power supply and some nice airflow. Happily, the Sapphire cooler managed to keep it very cool. Which brings us to the question, should you get one? This old beast is a surprisingly enticing purchase, not mainly because of its performance, but for its unique first-gen HBM and collectability. And it's very cheap and great value if you can find one for less than $125 in 2020, giving more performance than anything with the similar price tag. However, there's one big downfall. The power consumption is simply too high. Almost 300 watts under load, combined with, say, an overclocked processor, will necessitate a rather high wattage, more expensive power supply. Although you could probably get away on a decent 500 watt unit, I'd recommend sticking to 600 watts or more, and at that point, whatever price you save on the GPU, you're paying towards a better power supply, your electricity bill, and your air conditioning, especially in summer. This is the reason why I've decided to part ways with mine. The card you see has been my personal gaming card for most of my PC building career, but the hot summer combined with high prices now has really convinced me to sell and move on. Still, if you own a good power supply and you can put up with the extra heat, you won't regret buying this GPU for a good price. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please leave a like and please consider subscribing.